When you're in it, you can't see the forest for the trees, right? And so you've got to listen to these signals of other people.
It's very gradual. Like a burnout is something that is a buildup over time. My body was kind of giving me signals, right? Like I was exhausted, I was losing my hair, my weight was fluctuating. I think one of the things that early on I realized is by saying yes to an opportunity, you get the next opportunity. You need to own your time, and the only way you can do that is by owning the system that you're existing in.
If there's somebody watching or listening who is maybe feeling burnt out, they're feeling like, oh, I'm 35, I'm 40, whatever the number is, and I don't know where my life is going. I know, but you know, like it's amazing. We all think everyone has to have it all figured out all the time.
Yeah.
And there's this pressure we put on ourselves, and then you feel like I'm not making it, I'm not doing what my friends are doing, and I don't like my career, but I'm gonna retire in 10 years, so why bother? Mm-hmm. What would you say to that woman? What advice would you give her?
I think like really take
Hi everybody, and welcome back to The Laura Show. I am here with Shannon Gallagher, whose career I have been following on Instagram, and life who I've been following on Instagram for some time now, and I finally got you here. I appreciate you are now the new owner of Smithery Style.
Yes.
So we're gonna get right into it. Very new. Thank you first and foremost for joining me here today, and most importantly for dressing me. In case I look a little bit differently, I was styled by you and your company today, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
In fact, the first time I think I've been styled for this show. It's about darn time, is what I like to say.
Thank you. You look great in it.
Well, thank you. And what you're wearing is also from your
so this is spring. We're going to be launching in a couple of weeks, and these are also available on our website. So yeah.
Okay, we're going to get into it. First and foremost, I want to talk before Smithery, because this is a new venture for you. What did you used to do, so we can kind of give a background to the viewers and listeners?
Yeah, so I have 15 years of experience in PR and marketing, and I worked in the media as well as financial services, doing sort of brand marketing, storytelling, but you know, once you have children, and I've got two lovely girls, your axis sort of shifts, and so I decided last summer that it was time to kind of bet on myself and buy a business.
Two things. Storytelling. What does that really mean for people who are like storytelling, marketing? Like, I don't even know what that is. Like, are you literally reading a storybook? What does that mean from your vantage point?
Yeah, I think, you know, stories are sort of sticky, and the narrative of, you know, a brand can really be more memorable when we're thinking about stories. That was my most recent role, where I was doing client storytelling as well as content marketing. And you know, the kind of ability for somebody to sort of give a high level testimonial with it also feeling sort of like true to them, right? So authenticity, you probably hear that word a lot in like social media. And so a story becomes more authentic and cuts through the noise more than, say, like an ad would.
Oh,
and
so
that's kind of where I spent sort of the last more recent chapter. But in my early career, I was fortunate enough to work for CTV and CBC, and my job was actually to tell the stories of the journalists. So you know, who are they? What are they? What's their kind of like, you know, journey to where they are. So I always found that kind of fascinating, as like the people behind the stories.
Right, but so, and that's in hope to get the public to kind of connect to the journalists a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, if you think about the public personas that we have, or you think even about like celebrity culture, a lot of times people connect with somebody not because maybe their work, but because they have a similar, maybe parallel experience to them, like, you know, losing a parent or having cancer or all these kinds of things that happen kind of life behind the scenes, that backstaging, if you will.
Yeah.
And so when I was working for them, like Twitter had just come on, and it was like, you know, Shannon, can you set up all these journalists on Twitter? And now, you know, Twitter is a thing of the past, but it allowed journalists to sort of maybe tell a little bit more of who they were as a person, and so that's so interesting. Always been a thread for me, is the storytelling.
Yeah, because obviously I'm sure you use a lot of that in your now new marketing, but before we get there, I kind of want to touch back. You said, you know, I had kids and then I wanted to make a big change. I assume that there's a much larger story here. You know, it doesn't just happen overnight. your children, I believe you said, were 9 and
6.
9 and 6. So was it, as soon as you had children, you started to feel like you didn't want to juggle both, or how did that kind of come about?
Well, actually I was like on mat leave. I did a master's. I was somebody who was like, oh, I'm not going to I had this philosophy that kids fit in my life, not the other way around. And I think that comes from what society preaches and tells women is like, you can do it all. You can be the career mom, and you can also have a family, and there can be matching jumpers for Christmas, and dinners on the table every night at 6 p.m. and they do all these extra things. And realistically, I think I had that narrative of I need to do it all. I need to be it all. And I kind of held on to that, and I tried every which way to do it. I had an au pair for a summer or for a year. We have help in our home, but I resisted having a kind of a full-time nanny. But really to go up the ladder in a corporate sense, you sort of have to sort of give it all over, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the I'm just calling it out. It's a little bit of a false promise to women who have children. I think it's rare that women, without having a spouse at home who's maybe taking a lean out, can really be the present mom that they want to be, and all of that. So, I sort of was going fairly hard in my career, and then, at a certain point last spring, I really experienced what I guess a lot of people now term a career work-life burnout.
Can I ask, what did that look like for you, burnout? Because I think
it looks
shows
different
itself
for
different.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't recognize it as much in myself as people who know me really well recognized it in me and were like, "Are you okay? You seem like you're not, your happy self. You seem to be angry or grumpy." And I was kind of I was angry because I felt like I couldn't hold everything together at home, and I couldn't hold everything together at work, and but my body was kind of giving me signals, right? I was exhausted, I was losing my hair, my weight was fluctuating quite a lot, actually. I would gain weight, I would lose weight, and it was kind of this cycle, right? Because because I would try different things, okay, well, I'll just cut out working out, I just can't work out anymore. Right? I don't have time for that. Right? But then you realize you have to sort of find the things that make you, that working out for me, I was an athlete growing up, so it's actually kind of a balancing. My husband will say, Shannon, you're having a day, go for a run, do a spin class, do something for you for 30 minutes, and he's always right, I need that 30 minutes, right? Yeah. So for me, it was kind of the people around me really called it out before I knew what to call it.
Sometimes that's what it takes, though, right? When you're in it, you can't see the forest for the trees, right? And so you've got to listen to these signals of other people.
It's very gradual. A burnout is something that is a buildup over time, and over time you kind of get used to more and more, and you think, okay, I can handle a lot. So, in that kind of calling it out, I sort of had, I had great support at work, and talked to them about potentially taking a leave of absence to sort of, take some time to see, was it the work, was it the home, were there other things that I could do?
Out of curiosity, the conversation with HR probably, or whoever it was at work, were you scared to broach that subject? Because my guess is, knowing
it's
you,
terrifying.
You always came put together, you got your shit together, and all of a sudden now you're kind of admitting that something's amiss, right?
Yes, and I think it took me the courage. It took probably a month for me to get the courage up to have that conversation. But once I did, the reception was actually so supportive that I wish I'd had that conversation sooner. But I mean, I think everybody has their time. And I said I'll work 2 more weeks and then I'll go off and I'll tidy up all these things, typical A-type personalities do. And they were like, it's okay. How about tomorrow? You can start your leave tomorrow, and we'll tell the team wait a week or two, just you're gonna just take some vacation time kind of thing, like, and then you can decide, like, is it gonna be, you're gonna take a further leave. So I ended up actually taking 10 weeks.
Okay. What was your biggest fear in that? Was it that I won't have a job when I get back, my staff won't respect me, or was it some other kind of like, I feel like a personal failure in it? Where did you kind of sit with that?
I think that, it's the work that you're like, will it get forwarded, right? Like the work that you are working on kind of, takes a little bit of like, I mean, some things had to move forward, but a lot of things just were exactly where I left them 10 weeks after when I did eventually sort of come back. But that was like the hardest thing, was just knowing that like maybe, the team would be kind of at a standstill, waiting for me to sort of, what am I going to do? Am I going to come back or not? So that was kind of the hardest part for me. But once I hadn't been sleeping, that's another thing that is like a kind of a symptom of burnout. And like
Which
the
is
day
ironic
after,
because you're exhausted and then you can't sleep.
But your mind just like can't quit, right? So that was the other thing, was like the night after I slept like
the first day you got home? Then
the night after I told work, I finally slept.
Wow.
For like really slept. And felt like when I woke up that I was like rested and ready.
Oh my gosh, your body literally was telling you.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? And I feel like, I don't want to say it's just a female thing, but just from a lot of the women that I've spoken to on this show, like we're constantly not picking up on the messages that are being told to us from our body, right? And we're not intuitive or instinctual as we should be, because we're always just kind of like forcing, again, that maybe the narrative of we can and we should, and we see all these other women who seem to be doing everything and they're doing everything perfectly.
There's a whole
whereas
lot
if
of
we could just
smoke
be a
and
little-
mirrors. There's a whole lot of like, smoke and mirrors, I'm sure, behind every perfect family photo. Like I love the like real life versus Instagram people. And it is. It's like holding it all together. Just at some point can be like just too much. And I never before like considered that like you can take just basically like hit the pause button. And so that was kind of what I did. And I listened to a lot of podcasts.
It wasn't quitting, right? It was just pause.
Putting a pause button. Like if I needed to come back and I could figure it out and figure out like what was it? Was it the environment? Was it me? Could I do things differently at home or at work?
Do you need a big life change or small life? Like, is it something, this is the wrong career for me, or maybe I just needed a little step away and I just need to work a little differently when I come back? So you take the time off, 2.5 months. I'm curious, day one, you're rested. Do you have a plan for what you wanted to do?
I was still like kind of a loopy
person, but you slept. Like, did you have a plan, or were you kind of like? Because in my thoughts, people who take time off, they're kind of like, okay, like I'll just sleep and get some rest and
like the first 2 weeks I just tried to like be present, be with my family. I didn't really try to think too much about the future. And then like you start having conversations, of course, with like your spouse or your parents or your friends. And so I was fortunate like that we were actually up north, so I got to like go for a lot of walks, go for a lot of swims, like be with the kids. Maybe like do a DIY project, like kind of just sort of like do the things that were on my to-do list that like in life were kind of like it made me feel good to kind of like be productive in these like little micro moments. But after sort of like 2 weeks, it was like, okay, well, like, what are you thinking? And so I decided, I did, as I was saying, my master's while I was off on mat leave, and there's a research method that's sort of like kind of, interview style, right? So you're sort of focus grouping, you're having these kind of one-on-one dialogues, conversations. And so what I decided to do was just talk to people, like I talked to my mom, like how my mom was a teacher. When I was sick, she decided to stop teaching. So like, how did that decision come about? Like, I've never heard, like, what was your mindset, right? And she stayed home with us, and she was like, world-class mom. And I was really fortunate for that, right, experience. And I talked to Mel, your sister-in-law, who's a really good friend.
She's been on the show as well.
We all love Mel. And I asked her, like, she's decided that the kids are her full-time thing. And she was like, I just know that I can only do one thing really, really well at a time. And I was like, that's great. I mean, I think that is like, for a lot of women, like, the overwhelm of parenting, the like kind of, it never really stops, it's 24/7, like, you know, your world kind of really changes so much, and you also can't control.
And you're not prepared for it, is what I hear. No one's prepared for it.
Yeah, like, I mean, and I think like that's part of like, people sort of keep the like those sort of things like down, right? Like they don't tell you, hey, like, you know, you're not going to sleep for like the first 2 years.
You're really going to hate this.
Yeah, and like maybe that's why I didn't recognize the sleeping as a problem, because I had been like sleep deprived for 5 years or whatever, right? So, but yeah, I talked to various different people, and you know, I talked to women who like, they were like, you know, full on in the career and had the full-time nanny. What does that look like, right? Like, what is, you know, how do you feel at the end of the day? Is it filling your cup, right? And
was there a difference in perspective, like your mom and say maybe Mel, who said like, I'm choosing to do this one thing and I'm going to choose to do this really, really well, and I feel very fulfilled, versus somebody who's like, no, I'm kind of like dabbling in both and I'm probably doing a half-assed job at both, but like I really enjoy it? Or was there regrets? Like, I'm curious what some of the feedback was.
You know, my mom, I think, was really good in that, like, you know, now she's sort of through it and past it. And I think, like, she, I don't think she regrets it, but I think that she was an excellent teacher. And so if you're really good at something, it's hard to, like, be like, okay, I need to give that up. But she found other, like, outlets. Once we were, like, teenagers, she was the president of a volunteer organization called IODE, and you know, she found other ways, like, sort of after that. But my biggest fear was like, you know, you take too much time out, it's really, really hard to come back, right? And so I think for me, like, you know, then conversations with my husband, it was like, you know, I kind of feel like I want to be able to do both, but my chosen career path of communications and marketing is not one where you can do it part-time. There's very few options for part-time work. And so, you know, really another conversation I had, which was with a cousin who had bought a business early in her 40s as well. Like, she had had a long career in the corporate world. She has 3 children, bless, and the first one, unfortunately, was born with like disabilities that will be lifelong.
Okay.
And so she's got a full plate, and you know, her husband's busy. He's a CFO type guy. And so she actually bought a small business called Equifruit, and you might have seen them in Costco. They're the only banana you should buy. They're fair trade organic bananas.
Equifruit.
Equifruit.
Okay.
And it's a Montreal-based company, and when she bought it, you know, I mean, they had 1% of the banana market, and now in Canada they have 4% of the banana market.
And I'm sure after all these tariff calls, they're going to have an even bigger percentage, right?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Canadian
Dole
companies,
and all those other ones are, perhaps. And so, but you know, what she said to me was really profound, which is, you know, you kind of need to own the system. You need to own your time, and the only way you can do that is by owning the system that you're existing in. And so that was like a light bulb for me, where I was like, you know what? I think it's time to stop working for, you know, wonderful companies. Big companies are great places to get lots of great training, but you know, maybe it's time to just sort of like take a step out on my own and put all of this kind of experience and education to good use in a way that I feel purposeful. So that was kind of like my conclusion was, I need my career to feel purposeful. I need it to feel like I am in the driver's seat versus being told sort of, you know, now you're going to do this and now you're going to do that, and oh, you know, like, we're going to just put this on your plate, and you have time, right? Like, oh, sure, okay, I have time, right? So, and I'm very conscious of that with the people who work for Smithery. A lot of them are moms. They want to work, you know, part-time hours, and I completely support that.
Well, because you get it more than anybody else.
Yeah.
Chris, you had mentioned briefly that you started listening to podcasts. I guess that was during the 10-week time, right? What podcast were you kind of gravitated towards? Or
so, yeah, my cousin actually put me onto a podcast. It's the Harvard Business School podcast called Think Big, Buy Small. And it's by 2 Harvard Business School professors who teach a course in entrepreneurship through acquisition. And so I started listening to that, just go for a walk, put on the headphones. And it's a really great kind of starting place if you're looking to potentially buy a business. There's so many businesses that are actually, going to change hands. I think I saw a stat that 3 or 4 small businesses over the next 10 years will change hands. A lot of this has to do with like the boomer kind of, they're looking to like move on.
Yeah.
And so there's great businesses that have, steady income streams. They have clients, existing clients, and you can buy these businesses and make them better. And so I really loved this idea that it wasn't that I had to start or have the big idea, but that I could, find a business that sort of fit for my skills and my toolbox, which, I think in Smithery I was able to find.
How did you kind of stumble across this business in the first place? Because I imagine, like, if I'm sitting at home and I'm like, cool, I'm going to buy a business, it's kind of like, now what? Like, where do I go? What do I do?
Yes.
Do I just reach out to people and just say, like, hey, do you want to sell your business? Like, what happens?
So it's called the search, and there's 2 types of searches. There's a self-funded search, which I did, or a funded search. A funded search tends to be, you find an angel investor or a venture capitalist who, finds you as Laura, like somebody they want to bet on, and you go find a business. But that has some strings attached. Obviously, they want it to be, a certain size, maybe they want a certain industry. And so you kind of, you have sort of funding for, a year or 6 months to find and buy said business. So you're not kind of like walking away from that. But I guess I decided sort of week 4 of my leave that this was sort of the direction that I thought, at least I had the time, the mental space to sort of think about. And so I was decided right away that I was looking for something manageable. Mm-hmm. So not, I've got like 5 employees. It's not a big operation right now. We hope it grows, but I decided, to sort of look in that kind of self-funded zone. So businesses sort of typically under 500,000 would be typically your kind of target. I was geographically constrained. I'm not going to move from Toronto, and so you reach out to brokers. And brokers will list businesses sort of like, very little information, like, top line kind of information, just sort of what you need to know to be like, I would be interested or I wouldn't be interested.
Like the industry, for example, is that listed even? Or,
yeah.
Number of employees,
like if it's a
revenue?
Franchise, they always have like they have the, like kind of the revenue and sort of the size of the business, but it's very like, little. Like they rarely will say like what business is actually for sale. Mm-hmm. They'll just give a description of what kind of business is for sale. And then you can reach out to them, sign an NDA, and you get kind of like a bigger, kind of more fulsome package. So I went through a couple of those, but ultimately the problem with a lot of them were bricks and mortar. I didn't want to be bricks and mortar. I really wanted to think about something that was like e-retail. There was a couple of like, marketing firms do change hands, right? So somebody who's been a principal at a marketing firm, they're looking to sort of like move on. But again, decided that like selling my time is limited, right? We've just talked about
that was the whole problem.
That was the whole problem.
Place,
so
yeah.
I was looking for something that like was, going to be future focused and all of that. But actually the business I ended up buying, I've been a client of for 8 years. And so it was like almost, one of those things where you see like a sign and you're like, okay, universe, stop, right? So, I decided.
What was the sign?
Well, I had decided that I was going to do this, and I was, starting to look at certain businesses. And then the owner of Smithery, Mavis, announced that she was deciding to sell the business.
Announced on like Instagram? Okay.
And
so like literally the sign on Instagram.
Literally. I was like, yes. So then we had kind of our coffee chat. About a week or so later, she had lots of sort of interested parties, but I think, she and I clicked because she has a similar background. So she was in marketing, and the origin story is she was really, really confident in her work, but she was not feeling confident in how she was showing up in her day-to-day dressing. And she was doing these big presentations to executives and just feeling like, oh gosh, like I wish I just can just crawl into a hole. I just don't feel like I'm showing up in a way that I want to. And so she sort of thought, there must be more women out there like me. And at the same time, she had a friend who was initially like the business partner that she started it with, but they ended up after a couple of years splitting off. But her friend, she describes as the always put together stylish one, and she had taken styling courses. And so they started talking about this problem, and she started picking a few things for Mavis. And one of the things that was like kind of, you know, mind-blowing to her, and I think in marketing terms we think of it as, you know, what is the kind of like the problem we're solving for, and is that a lot of women don't know what their body shape is. Like they go their whole life and they're like have no idea what their body shape is. And so she was teaching Mavis about different body shapes, and there's 5 body shapes which we talk about at Smithery all the time. So it's our kind of our nomenclature: A, V, H, X, and O. And once you know your body shape, there are sort of rules in the stylist schools.
I'm going to interrupt you for a sec, because when you say letters, like I'm used to the stereotypical like apple,
Fruit.
pear, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
I don't even know what other ones
Yes.
there are, but I know those ones.
Yes, apple and pear. And
Yeah.
that's kind of part of the problem is like, you know, people don't really know past that. But so it's a different way of thinking about it. We don't really talk about fruit anymore. If you think of the letters,
So women's bodies aren't fruit?
Women's bodies are not fruit.
Okay.
They are.
Thank the Lord.
Yes. And so anyway, so she found out what her body shape was. She was an A. So an A, you're kind of like more fuller on the bottom. And then in stylist school, they teach you different ways to dress for your body. But kind of the thing that's a little bit the problem that they're solving for is a stylist will style you, and they'll bring things that look great on your body, but they'll never really say to you, hey, Laura, this is why it looks great on you. And so that's what we do differently at Smithery, is we tell you what are those rules, and then you kind of get this cheat sheet to be able to shop for your body.
Right.
And then we take it a step further and we sort everything by body shape. So on our website, if I'm an A, I can go into the A collection and I can see everything that would be recommended for my body shape.
Oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever heard of a store separate, like you hear stores separated by color, stores separated by like style perhaps, but never by body shape.
Yes,
That's
so
so
that
cool.
is like our unique secret sauce. So, and it makes online shopping like that much easier because, you know, ultimately, you know, you're getting things that would be, if you were truly that shape, like should be flattering for your shape.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, like when we're teenagers and maybe in our 20s, we all just want to buy what's cool, right? But the older you get, you start to realize
Those
like what's
hip hugger
cool.
Britney Spears things, like
Those never look good on me, not even when I was a teenager, which is
are like, yeah,
I don't
they
know.
make
who
everybody look big.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
there is something about, you know, as you get older, maybe once you've had children and you start to really think about, I don't care so much about being trendy. I just care about looking and feeling my best.
Yeah, and elevated basics, right? Like, so, you know, as a busy mom, like one of the things that I find is like, who has the time, right, to go and find all the like the newest, latest, greatest? And so that's another thing that like I really loved Smithery for, because I can just go into their website, or our website now, and I always found pieces that were like enduringly timeless. I wear for seasons after seasons. They are good quality. And I think there's a huge hole in the market between like being like a 20-something and then being like 50 plus, right? I think like moms are sort of ignored, and we're kind of like buying our clothes where we buy our groceries, and that's entirely like the problem, right? Like it's sad. Like let's pick up some apples and like some jeans for like $20 that we're literally going to wear twice, and then they're going to fall apart. So,
Right. So this really is a full solution for that. I want to go back to the story a little bit. I'm curious. Do you have a background in fashion?
So my very first jobs were in retail. So I worked for Sporting Life when I was in high school. And really enjoyed that job. I liked helping people. I actually worked in the men's section, so gosh, men are like a whole other beast. Like they hate the change room. You think women don't like change rooms? Men are like, oh, I'll go home and try it on, and I'll bring it back if it's not the right fit. It's like
they would rather go home and waste all that time than just try it on.
But if you can get a man in a fitting room, and then you just throw a few other things at him, and then he's like, oh, okay, wow, this is like such a great experience, right? And I think I really liked that kind of, I almost kind of felt like it was like easy for me, right? But I didn't think of it like, I kind of put that on a shelf, was like, I'm gonna go to university, I'm gonna study, I studied media information technoculture at Western, and I didn't really like look back. I didn't really think that's for me because, it's long hours, it's low pay, for the most part retail can be really, really challenging. So that was kind of like my toe dip, but I think experiences throughout my career, like one of my other first jobs out of university was I FedExed screeners all over the world. So now I
What do you mean
FedEx
screeners?
pants. So it was like, this is kind of dating me. Like there was not the file transfer services that we have today, like the drop boxes and all this, like you can just, shoot them something.
Everything through the cloud.
Everything, there's no cloud. So in lieu of the cloud, I would ship these screeners, which would be in various different languages. So like Japanese or any different language from a Canadian broadcaster, and then they're sending them to another broadcaster to license them in their country, and they get the screener to sample to see whether or not they think it's a fit for their broadcast channel. And so I would ship them out, and then they would ship them back to me, and I would have to file them into my library. So it's very funny because that is actually sort of now my life, right? And
you're an expert shipper.
I'm an expert shipper. PR, same thing. I'd have to ship screeners to like John Doyle and like on the. I'm sure they don't do that now. I'm sure it's like all digital, but. Like funny experiences throughout your career, you can kind of build on that.
Yeah. I know that firsthand myself, and like I know we were talking
it's not a straight
camera,
line.
like it's not a straight line, and you get some maybe not so great advice from your counselor at school, and you're going down a path, and before you know it, like your life's starting to take shape.
Yeah.
But
and you had said your counselor kind of. Like you
pushed me into science. When like look at my grades told the story. Like science was not going to be what I was great at.
Yeah.
And so I went down that path. And I mean, we're young, we're like sponges as kids, and like I was a very studious person. Like I wanted to do well, and I respected my elders, and I just assumed like, oh, you must know what you're talking about, hence why you're a guidance counselor. And not to say that they're all bad, but this one particular one I just didn't think hit the mark. But it's funny, like what I do now, I find like so much of my random experience actually helps. So like sometimes you don't see it until you're at the end and you're like, now it's all starting to weave together.
And that's kind of the way it feels. I sort of feel like this is my last chapter of my career. I kind of think like the next 10 years, this is what I want to do. But so like those early retail experiences, I worked for an golf video events company when I was in university. I worked for an entrepreneur. The most fun I've ever had. I loved that sort of startup culture, but that was also, again, like pop-ups. So, I would show up, I'd have to be there on the day, talk to the organizer. So we work with various different, women kind of centered events. Will have us as a vendor, and now instead of schlepping video cameras, I'm schlepping duffel bags of clothes and rolling racks, and I kind of find that to be fun.
I'm curious, when you realize like, okay, there's a company that I am interested in and we seem to have like this ethos together and it seems to make sense, do you start telling people that like I'm thinking about buying a business?
Yes. Okay, so I did two things. One was like I would tell like a few people, and I would be like, go to their, Instagram. They have a great following on Instagram, and just kind of see what their reaction was. And a lot of people were like, yes, you would do so well at this because you're a people person, and you're like the social media aspect of it, and you are kind of somebody who like I'm literally, sometimes I'm stopped on the street. You probably have this too because you're very, very stylish. And my husband will laugh. He'll be like, I literally get stopped, like, where did you get to whatever? And this is before I was thinking of buying a e-retailer stylist company. And like 9 times out of 10, I'd be like, well, it's from Smithery Style. And they'd be like, Smithery what?
Right.
And so, I think that there's also like some people are a little bit more like, I don't mean to be a tastemaker, but I think like people were like, you have really great, style and taste, like, and again, not like a formal education. Like I didn't go to, fashion school. I didn't do a stylist, designation. At all. I just think I've always appreciated fashion, and I think I've told you this. I was a figure skater growing up.
Yes.
So early on, spandex,
right.
rhinestones, like beautiful dresses, and I mean, I loved skating, but I loved making sure that like I had the best outfit.
It's all about the outfit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I kept a lot of them, so my girls better grow into them.
Was anyone kind of like, I don't know, like this? Did you hear any naysayers along the way?
Yeah, and I think that that's very normal. I think, you know, I initially like broached the subject with my parents, and my mom is the granddaughter of both sets of grandparents were both general store owners. Okay, so like a little bit of retail in the blood, and she had a very challenging time with, what do you mean there won't be a store, right? Like, how do you sell things through the internet? And I was like, Mom, I'm sure you've heard of Amazon. Yes. Really big company.
Yeah.
And she's like, but you're not Amazon. I'm like, it's the same idea, Mom. It starts the same way. If you, like, everyone, just millennials want things delivered to their doorstep. They do not want to have to step into a mall, all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, I think at first, like, there was just sort of that concern. And, you know, I think that it's important to take those in consideration, but I was also quite aware that my mom wasn't my target audience. Mm-hmm. My target audience was me. Mm-hmm. And I think this is just like gonna be, you know, best thing since sliced bread.
And it already was working.
And it was already working, yeah. That's the roots.
You just needed a little Shannon sprinkle.
Yeah, zhuzhing, yeah.
Any doubts that you had personally? Like, okay, like I've been working in like in the corporate culture, and you know there is something about like a bit of a safety net when you work in those places, which I'm sure is very comforting. And now here you are, like taking a big step out from where you've been, and doing it with 2 kids, and you know I'm sure a busy husband, and like, you know, are you like, what the heck am I doing? Can I do this? Am I capable? Any concerns like that, or were you like, no?
I think there's like always going to be a little bit of like you have imposter syndrome in any new thing that you're doing. And so I think that, you know, I was sort of like, there is those moments where you're having sort of self-doubt of like, what did I do? But then you have like really, really, you know, good reaction or like a very warm reception to the announcement. And you're like, you know, like I'm doing a good thing. And I strongly believe that like, you know, I'm in the right place. But, you know, I think it's natural to have some self-doubt and to have some negative self-talk from time to time, but just know that that's like coming from a place of like, we all have imposter syndrome a little bit in terms of when we take something on, like how do we know we can do that job or, you know, try something new.
And you don't, I guess, until you try it.
Yeah, right? Yeah, but you know, I think I think one of the things that early on I realized is by saying yes to an opportunity, you get the next opportunity and the next opportunity. And so I'm kind of like, you know, by nature, I'm a very positive person. I think positive thinking is 100% effective. Mm-hmm. It's like one of my mantras. And so I just sort of was like, okay, there are going to be times where I'm going to feel negative about it, or other people are going to say maybe things that I might, you know, I wish they didn't say that, right? Yeah. So like, you know, somebody will say, oh, well, you're buying this. Have you met the people who work for you? I wouldn't buy a business if I hadn't met them. Like people will ask you, no, well,
like as if you didn't do your due diligence.
Yeah,
like they don't have a lot of faith in you. Clearly,
right? Exactly. No,
you're like,
yeah.
Do I look that stupid? Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
and you know, and I really like, you know, over time. So I did end up going to finish the story. Did go back to work for about 3 months. Because it takes a long time to negotiate a deal on any business. And I think that that's important to know is like, even though you've decided like this is maybe the business I want to buy, maybe it's like similar to buying a house. Sometimes you just have to be patient, you know? You gotta like, they've gotta come to it. It's an emotional transaction as much as it is like a financial
Especially
transaction.
Someone who started it like letting go. It's like letting go of one of their children, right?
Yeah, and Mavis really describes like it is kind of like, you know, giving her baby to me. And I think she was very gracious about it in terms of like how she prepared her clients and her audience. And I'm really grateful for that. I think it's very challenging, but I also, you know, I know that for her, like there has to be sometimes you have to close a chapter and it feels right. And I think right now, you know, was the right time for her to sort of step back and let new energy and new kind of a new owner sort of take
take the reins.
Take the reins,
Yeah.
and but keeping the DNA, keeping all the great pieces, and just elevating it.
Well, and that's a lot of that happens with people's homes, right? They put so much energy into creating a space that they love, and what they fear is that some buyer's going to come and just erase it and eradicate it, right? And so sometimes people say, no, like I will only sell this home to somebody who gets it, who wants to keep the bones and the structure as it is, who understands what this is about. They're not going to tear this down. And like, as a realtor, sometimes you're like, what are you talking about? Like, a deal is a deal. Let the people do what they want with it. But people are that emotionally tied to it. So it's very similar to buying a business. I'm curious. I think you launched or made the announcement in January, was it?
Yeah. So
it's been about a month and a half?
Of January 15th. Yeah.
So how's it been?
Well, it's been good.
Yeah.
I think I'm on a learning curve, and I'm learning every single day. What's working and what's not. I'm also, people are getting to know me, and so. But I think it's also important to be like, it's me plus the team. So like whenever, I want to make sure there's lots of different kind of voices, because I think it's not just me. It's like a lot of our team.
And that probably comes from your storytelling experience as well. Like the company is made up of all these people, and they have their different stories and reasons for being there, right?
Exactly. And so it's going really well, but I'm excited for the spring launch. Mm-hmm. So it'll be the first season where I did all the buying. So when I knew that I was buying the business, my employer at the time, I had November 11th off. I did all the buying in like November 11th to 12th, I think. So this time around, I've taken like almost a month. So you buy almost like a year ahead. So right now I'm buying for fall, winter. Mm-hmm. So I was at the very end of like, I had to basically they were like, this is the last week we can place any orders.
Right.
So, but I'm really excited because we're bringing on, some new brands, bringing back some old favorites, and we've got some exciting stuff happening. One of the things that I've sort of changed or, evolved is capsules. And so on the website, we relaunched the website sort of day one I worked with a great agency, Hughes & Co., recommend highly. They work with small businesses, they work with non-for-profits. And they do big agency work for small budgets, and I couldn't be happier with the outcome. But my first conversation with Allie, who's the principal there, was I want it to be so easy that you can literally buy your wardrobe in 10 clicks or less for a season. Okay. And so the idea of capsules was sort of something that she's like, let me take this away, we'll figure it out, we'll figure out how to automate this. And so now that's a different way that we're kind of launching all of our products. So before it was new arrival, mm-hmm. and it wasn't like, this goes with that and that goes with this. So now we kind of curate collections and we launch them as capsules, and in each capsule you can choose, like 3 bottoms and you choose one, and like 3 tops and you choose one.
And you can probably also filter by body type as well.
Yes, and the descriptions will have like the body type as well, so it's in there as well.
So it's kind of like having like a stylist on your phone.
Yes.
In a way, right? Because what often happens with me, for sure, I've made so many mistakes online shopping. It's quite sad for my wallet. And, because you buy one piece, isolated piece, and you get it home, and then you realize like, this doesn't really go with anything, or I need a different heel for this, or I need a different jacket for this. I need the color's different than I thought, and like you start to realize like you have nothing to wear it with, but you don't want to return it because you like the piece. And then what you end up doing is now it's let me go on and try and find another piece, and you just keep buying like one piece at a time, versus what I think you're doing, which is like everything here.
Yeah, exactly. Like our capsules range from 3 to 5 pieces. So sometimes it's like a smaller capsule. We did a Valentine's Day capsule, which was like great, and it was like super simple. Like here's 1 bottom, here's 2 tops that are Valentine's Day related, and that went really, really well. People really liked that. But I think it's getting people from like that 2 to 3 pieces to the 5. But one of the things that when I was looking at this is it doesn't really make economic sense to send somebody one thing. Maybe if you're like a big corporation and you've got big budgets, but as a small business, if you send something to that person, one thing, they try it on at home, it's not jiving because they don't know what to wear it with, or as you say, like there's a million different reasons. and then they return it, you kind of like, it doesn't make economic sense. And so
the margins are probably pretty slim there anyway, right?
Think about like, should I be buying just one thing? Probably not. You should probably buy a collection of things. And the capsule idea isn't a new thing, but I think it's really coming back because it does mean like you get this grouping of things that you can wear multiple different ways, multiple different times, and you get it by getting it all kind of like at one time. You're assured that you kind of can make those outfits happen.
You can take the sweater off and just wear the t-shirt, or throw a blazer on, and you have like a completely different outfit. So it's like you have something for this Monday and something for next Tuesday, and like you're good to go.
Yeah,
right?
And I know like the office culture is really coming back. Like when I was working, I would go in one day a week. It was a fashion show, right? Like there was a colleague who, she had an Excel spreadsheet to make sure she didn't wear the same thing twice.
I need to know this human being. That's so next level. And it's funny because sometimes colleagues at work are like, in a year's time, like they're like, I maybe have seen you wear like the old. Now this was back when it was like, I was showing up to work pre-COVID. Now I'm like, it's like jeans and, we've gotten a little more casual. I kind of miss those days though, right? And maybe it's coming back, but I love that, where it's like, you want to feel stylish, but you don't want to every day think that hard about it, because we all have busy lives. Like it's not like getting dressed is my full-time gig in the morning, right?
No, definitely. And I do think it is kind of coming back. Like I think for a while people were like, I just dress from the neck up. And, now, pants. This year, I think, the revenue from pants with the previous owner was like far exceeded all other kind of products categories. Great. I mean, so people need pants, right?
People clearly need pants.
People clearly need pants.
People need pants that fit properly.
Right, because they
That's
probably
clearly the hole in the market,
they
right?
haven't bought pants since, pre-COVID, right? So, and a lot has changed. Like the corporate dress code has changed because I think, employers, if they want their employees to come into the office and feel good, then they need to be like, jeans are okay. Yeah. Or, so things have relaxed a little bit. And I remember going back after my first mat leave, and I went to did like the, go back to workshop, and showed up. And even in that like 12 months that I had been gone, the kind of like corporate dress culture had gone from like sort of Chanel wearing suit ladies to like hoodies and sneakers. And I was like, sorry, what? So did I keep the tags on any of that? Of course not.
Yes, of course not. Like, and you were like, I don't match the culture anymore, right?
No, yeah. It had totally shifted and become like, catered more to like a cooler, hipper, younger sort of vibe, which I would have been totally happy to do. But yeah, so it's, I think that that's kind of also why people are kind of maybe looking at their wardrobes and saying it needs time.
This book, we haven't mentioned it yet, but this was, I think, a big catalyst for you. Do you want to talk to us about this?
Yeah, so Black Stretchy Pants, this was a book that, it's by Chip Wilson, who's the founder of Lululemon. My dad gave it to me. So my dad picked this up and read it. I mean, our family, like, we love Lululemon. I think Canadians just generally just love the story of Lululemon. But if you're ever curious about what was like his ethos, really good read. But when I was thinking about buying Smithery's, one thing that I remembered reading in this book, he talked about that, and we touched on this right at the beginning. Like, there's this sort of like women can do it all and all of that. And so our mother's generation made that happen. Like women can be, lawyers and doctors and do this and do that. But our mom's generation let their kind of health and well-being sort of slide as they were trying to break that glass ceiling for us. And but he's talked about how millennials want, first and foremost, to feel healthy, and they want to feel good and confident. And so that was kind of the ethos of where he felt like there was this hole in athleisure, right? Athleisure and yoga was kind of this, on the rise, and mindfulness. And so he kind of tapped into the fact that like we have these educated, high income earner millennial women who've looked at what their moms have done and said, great, want to follow that path, but I want to do it in a way that I still have me, right? And I'm still taking care of me. And so, and I think like, that really resonated for me when I think about the Smithery customer. So many moms that I talk to are like, I find fashion post kids, like I found fashion overwhelming. I don't have time for it. I don't know what to wear. My body has changed. All of these things are things that you hear all the time from like your peer group. And I was hearing this more and more, and maybe I was like tapping into it more. And I was like, you know what? Like if it can work for Lululemon, maybe it can work for Smithery, but more so on like your day-to-day fashion. So let's, elevate from the black stretchy pant into the stretchy jean.
Right.
And,
yes, you're
right?
saying like keep the black stretchy pant in the yoga studio.
Yeah.
Ladies.
Yeah.
And because that was
Right.
our only option. It was a kind of like workwear or your yoga wear, right? This kind of
Exactly.
in between, like running errands. You see a lot of women like still doing that, right? And it's like we still do want to feel good. Like even if we're just like running to the store, it's what does my clothes say about me? And I don't want to just look like every other woman. I want to have it reflect my style, right? And so if it sounds like you're giving them a lot of options.
Yeah, and so thanks, Dad, for passing on the book, and it is a really good read. I mean, Lululemon is maybe not I'm not going to be Lululemon maybe tomorrow.
You never know. You never know.
I think it's really what's really interesting is like they bootstrapped. They like made it happen. They were really they were a startup at one point, and so I think that's inspiring as an entrepreneur to say, here's a guy who had an idea, and he worked 2 jobs at the beginning. He was working his day job and working Lululemon, and I think I joke like I quit my day job. This better work out, right? But like I think it's a little bit different, but I think that the idea is there, and I think that the kind of the millennial woman that we really are catering to, as a marketer, I think it's pivotal to say like I talk about know your shape, love yourself. So that's like my kind of mantra as my sign off when I do try-ons, and I think that it is a lot about like self-love, right? And I think that connects very much to the woman that we believe are shopping with Smithery.
I love that. I'm curious, as we kind of wrap things up here, if there's somebody watching or listening who is maybe feeling burnt out, they're feeling like, oh, I'm 35, I'm 40, whatever the number is, and I don't know where my life is going. I know, but like it's amazing. We all think everyone has to have it all figured out all the time.
Yeah.
And there's this pressure we put on ourselves, and then you feel like I'm not making it. I'm not doing what my friends are doing, and I don't like my career. But I'm going to retire in 10 years, so why bother? Mm-hmm. What would you say to that woman? What advice would you give her?
I think like really take a step back and like take a look in the mirror and make sure that like if you're like, okay, I can just mail this in for the next 10 years, that's fine. I think for me, like I know that like my soul is more alive now. I'm doing something that feels like I'm like on a right path for me. And I think a lot of us like it's just sort of like, okay, it's good enough, right? And we only have one life to live, so don't save it for the dress rehearsal, right? Like it's not a dress rehearsal life. Like just you gotta decide what you want your legacy to look like, and if the legacy that you see in the mirror isn't the legacy you want to leave for your children or for your husband, or like just generally like if you're just unhappy, I think like it's okay to, and we should not just stay in an unhappy place or a place that feels comfortable but not something we're passionate about. And it's really, really hard, and I think but the only thing you can do is kind of be honest with yourself. Yeah. And then I think by sharing my story today, I hope that like another woman who's maybe feeling that, because I talked to other moms, like I was like, I'm on a leave of absence, and it was so interesting how many other moms said, I've done the same thing, or I've just decided that I'm going on a leave of absence. And like it was sort of like one of these like like it's under the surface. If you're like willing to talk about it, mm-hmm. It comes.
You'll find other
it comes
people.
Up.
You'll
yeah.
find
your people.
Yeah, and they're there.
Yeah.
And it's it almost sounds like it's a problem that maybe not, we all think it's just an individual problem, but it sounds like it's actually something that's happening to a lot of us. So I
think it's
appreciate
very
you.
systemic. Yeah.
I really appreciate you opening up. I'm super excited to see what you do with this. I know you've only just begun. You've always struck me as such an interesting, hardworking person.
Thank you.
Certainly from my perspective, it always seemed like you had your shit together. So, you know, it's really nice to hear this kind of other side to things where it's like, you know what, us as humans, what we all have in common is like there is always a struggle. There is always this moment of like, I need to make maybe a big change, and you did it. So congratulations to you, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Laura.
And guys, we'll see you next time.